There's a quiet piece of agricultural history that, well, almost vanished. One that really kept families alive through some of the harshest winters on record. During the brutal years of the Second World War, when supply chains collapsed and food was, terribly scarce, survival didn't come from innovation alone. It came from rediscovering what already worked. Among those rediscoveries was a hardy winter leek, capable of surviving temperatures as low as -30 degrees Fahrenheit without greenhouses, heaters, or any sort of modern protection. While other crops froze solid, this leek stood in frozen soil, just waiting to be harvested when everything else failed. The final siren. What makes this story worth your attention isn't just the resilience of the plant. It's the uncomfortable truth behind why it disappeared. This wasn't a failed crop. It wasn't inferior. In fact, by survival standards, it outperformed most modern varieties. Yet today, it's almost entirely absent from large-scale agriculture. The reasons, well, they tell you everything about how modern farming priorities shifted, from survival and resilience to uniformity, speed and profit. So, if you're serious about food security, historical agriculture, or simply understanding what we've lost, this is one of those overlooked lessons that still matters today. The winter leek that refused to die in frozen ground. The leek varieties grown during the Second World War, especially those known as winter leeks, were bred not for size or speed, but for endurance. Unlike modern hybrids, these leeks developed thick, fibrous cell structures and a high concentration of natural sugars that acted as anti-freeze. This allowed them to remain alive even when the ground froze solid. Farmers in Northern Europe and parts of North America relied heavily on these leeks because, well, they could be left in the soil throughout winter. Instead of having to harvest everything before the frost set in, they simply dug them up as needed, even through snow and ice. The flavour actually improved after freezing, becoming sweeter and richer, which made them both practical and honestly quite desirable. This wasn't luck. It was intentional selection over generations. Farmers saved seeds from the toughest plants, gradually creating a crop that didn't just tolerate winter, it depended on it. Why wartime growers depended on them for survival. During the Second World War, food production faced multiple pressures. Labour shortages, fuel rationing and transportation breakdowns. Crops that required storage, refrigeration or rapid distribution became liabilities. Winter leeks solved all of these problems at once. They acted as living storage, No root cellar needed, no preservation methods required at all. They just remained fresh in the ground for months on end. In regions where temperatures regularly dropped far below freezing, this could really mean the difference between consistent nutrition and, well, hunger. Leeks also provided essential vitamins during winter, especially when other greens were unavailable. They were a reliable source of nutrients at a time when deficiency diseases were a real threat. In practical terms, a small plot of winter leeks could actually sustain a family when supply lines failed. That level of reliability is something, honestly, that modern systems rarely prioritize. Why did modern farming quietly abandon them? Well, here's where things take a turn. After the war, agriculture didn't continue optimizing for resilience. Instead, it shifted toward efficiency, scalability, and market appeal. Winter leeks had several problems from a commercial perspective, you see. They grew slowly, often taking longer than modern varieties to reach maturity. Their size was inconsistent, and they didn't always produce the uniform appearance that supermarkets demand. Mechanized harvesting also struggled with crops left in frozen ground. Modern hybrids replaced them with faster-growing, more visually consistent leeks that fit industrial systems better. These newer varieties perform well under controlled conditions, but honestly, they lack the extreme cold tolerance of their predecessors. In short, winter leeks weren't abandoned because they failed. They were abandoned because they didn't fit the economics of modern agriculture. How you can still grow WWII-style winter leeks today. The knowledge hasn't disappeared entirely. Heirloom seed varieties similar to those used during WWII still exist, often labelled as hardy winter leeks. To grow them successfully, timing is critical. Seeds are typically started in early spring, allowing the plants to develop fully before winter. By late autumn, they should be well established with thick stems. Planting depth matters more than most people realize. Leeks benefit from being planted in trenches and gradually filled in as they grow. This not only blanches the stems, but also provides extra insulation against cold. Soil drainage is another key factor. While these leeks tolerate freezing temperatures, they struggle in waterlogged soil that freezes and thaws repeatedly. Raised beds or well-drained ground improve survival rates significantly. Once winter sets in, the process becomes, well, quite simple. You just leave them in the ground. Harvest only what you need. Even under snow, they remain perfectly viable. What this really teaches us about is resilience versus efficiency. You see, the story of the winter leek isn't just about a forgotten crop. It's about a much broader shift in priorities. During the war, farmers optimized for survival under the worst-case conditions. These days, modern agriculture focuses on predictability and profit under, well, ideal conditions. That difference, it has consequences. Crops like winter leeks offered a built-in safety net. They reduced dependence on storage, energy, and transportation. And in a crisis, those traits become absolutely invaluable. Reintroducing even a small portion of these resilient crops into your own growing system changes your level of independence. It means having food available even when systems fail. Now, how to apply this knowledge in practical terms? If you're working with a garden or a small farm, dedicating even a single bed to winter-hardy crops like leeks can make a measurable difference. Combine them with other cold-tolerant plants, such as kale or spinach, and you create a system that produces food year-round without additional infrastructure. Another practical approach is seed saving. By selecting the most cold-resistant plants each season, you gradually develop a strain adapted to your specific climate. This mirrors exactly what WWII farmers did, and it's one of the most effective long-term strategies available. Even for those without land, understanding these principles changes how you evaluate food systems. It highlights the gap between what is efficient and what is reliable. Why this forgotten crop still matters today The conditions that made winter leeks valuable during WWII, disrupted supply chains, extreme weather, limited resources, haven't disappeared. If anything, they're becoming more relevant again. Revisiting crops like this isn't nostalgia. It's practical. It's about recognizing that resilience was once a primary goal of agriculture, and that some of those solutions still outperform modern alternatives under stress. The winter leek is proof that survival often depends less on new technology and more on preserving what already works. If you found this kind of deep dive into forgotten survival agriculture valuable, make sure to subscribe and share this with someone who takes food security and history seriously. There's a lot more like this coming, and you won't want to miss it.